Hey, we're back at the Benzinga Cannabis Capital Convention, and we're kind of winding up the day here. I've run into Scott Berman, who is the president and co-founder of the Panther Group, and the Panther Group is an investment capital group. Actually, one of the reasons why people came is to talk with Scott into looking for either early companies or mature companies. So Scott, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your company and actually why you got into this space.
Sure. So we're investors in cannabis companies. We've been around for 8 years. We've done about 45 different investments in the space, and we're deployed into about 23 different sectors. So we invest in cannabis banking and lab testing and advertising. We also invest in plant-touching companies like grows and retailers. So we look at the whole ecosystem of the space and try and find the winners.
So part of being a capital company like yourselves is you just don't throw money willy-nilly at somebody, obviously, although a lot of people would like that to happen.
Yeah.
You have to have your business model, it has to be deep, and you have to have really experts working to analyze and actually be part of the company as it grows. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah, it's a great process. Actually, there's a lot of due diligence, and so we look at each company individually and look at the sector that they're in and the geography that they're in and find out, like, do they have a good roadmap for the future? Most importantly, we also look at the team. Have they had prior success? What's the staff look like, and how do they plan to grow into their numbers? Everyone's got rosy predictions, and how do we? Everybody's going to do $10 million this year and $100 million in 2 years.
That's right.
Right. So how are we going to get from A to B? How are we going to scale it properly and be profitable?
Well, I would say, and being an accountant, CPA, if you prepare somebody's projections and you don't show enormous growth, they'll find somebody else to do it for you.
Yeah.
So how do you, from a standpoint of expertise, analyze that from an emerging company? I mean, one that already has a track record, it may be easier to be able to do. For an emerging company, startup, it's a little bit more difficult.
It's definitely more difficult. One of the ways we do that is to look at comps in the industry. So if you're trying to enter a sector like software or lighting or banking, we look at companies that are successful in that sector and try and understand if the numbers make sense relative to what these other mature companies are doing.
Sure.
Now, one thing that makes that more difficult is the different markets. So, for example, if you're evaluating a retail company in one state, it might look a lot different than another state based on the laws and the regulations.
Sure. And again, operations state to state, especially in the cannabis business, is a lot different.
Yes.
It's not like opening up a department store in Arizona and opening up a department store in Florida. Totally different.
Yes.
And you have the expertise within your company to not only handle that, but also, once you get involved, advice on how to continue the business in a profitable state, I would say.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And actually, you asked how I got into this, and it was through politics, actually.
Really?
I got it. I previously had a political ad company, and one thing I understood about cannabis is the politics is different in every single state. The timing is different. There's 38 medical markets, 19 or so adult use markets, and they're all at a different level. So it's really important to understand what the laws are of that state to understand the timing.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. And that dictates when and how we invest.
Okay. We're a local source here in South Florida, or Florida itself, Cannabis News Florida. So have you done anything in the state of Florida, or looking to do something in the state of Florida?
We're definitely looking in Florida. Some of our portfolio companies are operating here, but we haven't invested in any plant-touching operations in Florida. We think the time is now, actually, because this medical market is getting stronger. We hopefully, maybe in 2024, we'll have adult use here.
Right, that's what predictions are.
Yes, so a really good time for us to invest is right before a state flips from medical to adult, because that's when we really see major growth in every sector.
Now, you were talking about politics relating to it. What have you seen in different states when they convert from medical to adult or recreational? Do they change the laws dramatically? Like, everybody can grow recreational, but you can't grow medical? How is You know, and that's tough for an investment person
Yes.
to take a look at.
Yeah.
What has been your experience relating to that?
So it's a great question, and actually it is different in every situation. So we just recently had a situation in New Jersey where they just allowed the medical stores to start selling adult use, but there's only about 13 stores that are allowed to do that now. So that's the way they did it there. In other states, it's definitely been different where it's opened up all at once. So it's really been, it's really studying each one by itself to understand what's going to happen. So part of it is really timing it right, but also bringing in the right business practices and service sectors that are needed when every market evolves.
Right, and you have to, I guess, if you're dealing with a medical company today, understanding that ultimately that would probably be the company to convert to recreational.
Yes.
And for those who are not a national company and maybe not be in a recreational state, if you invested in them as that turn begins, you can help them get over that hump on how to handle things for the turn.
Absolutely, because when things turn, first of all, the addressable market explodes.
Right.
Especially in states that have limited medical cards, right? So there's a lot more people that have access. There's also different form factors that are allowed in. So many states have laws against no edibles. I live in Pennsylvania, there's no edibles allowed.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
And when they opened up the program, like Florida, there's no flour in the beginning.
Right.
And then they added flour. And so then if you were making flour, you can then come to Florida and sell your stuff here. So really understanding what's allowed by each rule and when it's going to change really helps us bring these companies to that state.
So if in a company, and we have probably, looking at now, almost all the companies here now are multi-state operations.
Yeah.
Some larger than others, but multi-state operations. What kind of business would you look for to invest in the state of Florida right now?
So a lot of the ancillary businesses, for example, banking, is one. Advertising is another one. So things like that everybody needs in every market, those are the businesses that are most interesting to us. Then there's also cultivation equipment.
Sure.
Because there's a lot more grow licenses being handed out, then there's more buildings going up, there's more benches that are needed and HVAC systems and all that. So the one thing that we've been able to do effectively is study the trajectory of every state and really understand where it's headed. Even though it's going at a different pace and in slightly different direction, they end up in a lot of the same place.
Right. It's building that. The model may not go straight up, it may take a little left, a little right, but eventually it's going to get to the same place.
That's my theory.
Right.
I also have another theory about the cannabis consumer. I don't think they're going to be eventually that different from each state.
Right.
So in other words, when you look at the alcohol industry, the people that you're advertising whiskey to and vodka to, it's not that much different depending on where you live. But cannabis is much different now, but eventually it'll be very similar.
Well, when a market first opens up, you have the excitement of different brands coming in and names and then the excitement. And then after a while, everyone knows what they like and they buy what they like.
Yeah.
And the naming situation doesn't really make that difference anymore.
Yes, exactly.
It's building brand alliance. I mean, you really want people to come to especially here with your dispensary, and building name recognition, that they're going to constantly come back to one of your locations to buy what they need rather than go shopping around.
And what we've also learned, once you start to buy from your favorite store and your favorite products, you tend to go back the same way.
Sure.
I mean, I go to the same liquor store every time and buy this similar type of wine. And so, when cannabis opens up, I think the habits are going to be very similar, but there's a long time between for that to happen. And so there's an enormous opportunity to help brands grow. That's why a big part of our focus is marketing and data and advertising. Really understanding what the consumer's buying and finding those consumers in new markets.
Yeah. The key to any business is brand loyalty.
Yes.
And you can build it, but they won't necessarily come until you can build that brand loyalty.
Yes.
So, and your company is able to help people do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we gather data on companies that have, cannabis consumer shopper data. So we ingest data from point of sale platforms. We have cannabis business data, so we understand what's happening there, and we also have investor data. And so that really helps us build a profile of what the state will look like.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, I appreciate you stopping by. I
Yeah.
know it's kind of the end of the day.
I know.
In fact,
Thank you for
I'm just
fitting me
looking
in.
around and kind of like packing things up around
I
me.
know.
But I really, really appreciate you come by, Scott.
Yeah.
And let's keep in contact
Yeah.
when you kind of get into the state.
Yeah.
Let's kind of send me the press release first, and we'll put it out.
You got it, man. Appreciate the time today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott.
All right,
Appreciate
bye-bye.
it.
Awesome.